See. Can you hear Nelly?
I'll speak and you can tell me if you can hear me.
Okay, I think they.
I don't see a thumbs up or down or anything. I don't see a thumb.
See, James might be. Okay, yes.
You can hear?
Yes. Great.
Yes, good. Okay, we need to know. So, when you were reading that, I thought, oh, well, I could talk from that line. Oh, no, I could talk from that line. No, I could look up that line, but I don't remember most of them. But when you said you welcome the complexity of your identities, I want to just add to that and I say, and I welcome the complexity of how you meditate. So that's really what our approach is about, is saying there's not one way. There are as many ways in the room, and if we were in a bigger room, there those people too. So, so what I'm going to do, and a little more introduction, based again off of what you said, Trina, which is, it was really I was sort of feeling into that when I first started practice in the late 1970s, 80s, 90s. Well, I still practice, but during those times, really.
Recording in progress.
Okay. I keep going. Are we good? You think?
You can keep going.
Okay. I was a lesbian back then, still am, and I wouldn't go to most Buddhist events, and it was not outright discrimination, not at all, but it was more like, oh, not even noticing, sort of like it just wasn't on the map of most Buddhist meditators. So it's just really heartwarming to hear that, now decades later, and of course the whole world has changed around that issue in any rate. So what I'm going to do today is much what I did last week. I'm going to read some from this book. I thought about writing a new talk for you. I thought, no, wait a minute. We worked on this book for a long time. We say it really well, so why not read from the book? So I'm reading a different section, and then we'll meditate, and then I will get to hear about the complexity and diversity of what happens in some of your meditation. That is, those of you who choose to speak up about it. But one more thing. After I read, I really want to open it up to any questions or discussion about what I read, and then we'll meditate. Okay? Good to go? All right. I could have chosen so many places. But I chose the section called All Experience is a Story. This book is a story. Most Dharma teachers tell stories. The Buddha taught in stories, discourses that included parables and conversations. I'm going to inject some things. So we teach in conversation. We believe the Buddha, reading the sutras, also taught in conversations with students. I've heard many people repeat the stories the Buddha supposedly told. As we say supposedly because we don't really know, right? It wasn't written down for hundreds of years, so we don't really know, but supposedly taught. Then tell another story about hearing his stories. Meditation teachers probably have varied intentions in telling stories. Our inner world is full of stories. Stories about what has happened, what is happening, what might happen. I used to believe I could and should shut off the stories, but now I believe I need to look into them and be curious about the stories. Why are your stories in meditation less worthy than the Buddha's, than famous meditation teachers, than ours? Buddhism traces our stories back to the mind, which it treats as a sense store, just like our other 5 physical senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. But consider this. Our mind develops wisdom through these stories, as well as our contemplations and our intuitions. Just as our body becomes wiser from knowing sensations, gestures, and touch, and our ears become wiser through hearing sounds and listening to others. Our stories come from our experience, yet we often don't know how to talk about this in meditation practice. You might have heard that you should stop thinking in meditation, that you should try not to think and don't make up a story afterwards. But you probably are making up a story about it despite yourself. A story about it being a good meditation or having an exalted experience, but more likely about having a distracted meditation or being an inadequate meditator or something in between or a bit of both. I got a thing on my screen here. Do I need to do something? Are we good?
What's that? What does it say?
It says the host spotlighted your video for
Oh.
every.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah.
Don't show this. Or join later. Later.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Don't quite believe us if you have not heard our take on this before. We don't expect you to. After all, everyone knows you shouldn't allow stories into your meditation. That's daydreaming. That's monkey mind. That's not to be trusted. But we haven't found this to be true. And besides, we really like monkeys. I might add, I have now made several monkeys in play. I'm very into monkeys, so I don't like putting down monkeys. So can you learn to trust your senses in meditation, to trust your experience? Have confidence that your stories will evolve. That's very important. This is a question I have often asked myself. In my experience, like friends we trust, we can't always believe what they say or assume we know exactly what they mean. We best examine our stories and discern the ones that are worth repeating to others and to ourselves. We can't take our stories at face value, so we need to develop a more nuanced relationship with them. Like cultivating a garden or tending to a path, we have found that the cultivation of our stories is a worthwhile endeavor for those who wish to reduce harm to themselves and others. And, basically that is what Buddhism is a path about reducing harm to ourselves and others. And so what we did in this book is we also took quotes from members of our community and we sort of put them in a little boxes. And here's one. I've discovered an inner narrator in my mind, one who's basically a curious observer to my experience, both in meditation and outside of meditation, a kind storyteller. So we do this thing in this book, we have a lot of conversations with each other, and that's actually how we wrote the book. We wrote it during lockdown and some after, and we would get online. Oh, my co-author's down in Southern California. So we'd get online on Zoom and we'd open a Google Doc and we'd just start writing a conversation back and forth to each other. And of course, then we edited it. But that was how we wrote it. And it's really fun, by the way. We just made up the idea. It's really fun. Okay. So this is a conversation in the language of experience. And this will probably be in this piece that I read, but I coined this term, the language of experience, because I realized many people don't really know how to talk about their experience especially in meditation. It's not something we have learned to do. It's kind of like a foreign language. So that's how I called it the language of experience. It's really something that's learned. And it's learned a lot from in our groups. We always do groups where people speak about their meditation experience. So you start to hear other people using the language, and then just like an immersion, it starts to happen for you. So here's a conversation. And I'm going to sort of lean one way and the other way about, to go back and forth in this conversation. Okay. Let's talk in a language of experience. I coined this term when I realized I was expressing myself so differently than how others usually talk. A friend got mad at me, I think because she didn't know what I was talking about. She did? I wonder about that. After she told me what she thought was going on for me, I turned inward and I found words that more accurately expressed my experience. She imagined I was correcting her. She couldn't understand the value in speaking in the language of experience. I realized it was foreign to her. It's so interesting. It's our gig. Before saying something, we turn inward and check out what we actually mean. As with other practices, we don't always get this right, but we try. Sort of like the old maxim, say what you mean what you say. When people tell me that what I'm experiencing or correct me as if they know me better than I know myself, I tend to shut down. I don't want to play anymore. Yes, you've got it. That feels so good. What is this? Why do I feel so good when people understand what's going on for me? I feel an uplift, a subtlety in my body, like in my heart. Actually, I do feel it in my chest, though it's mostly emotional, and emotions are hard to describe beyond those simple descriptive words like happy, connected, and in sync. Emotions may be hard to describe, but I can feel what you're saying. Your language of experience affects me. I don't feel so distant from your experience and from you. I'm not just preparing a comeback that is smart or one-ups you. That's like when we listen to someone's meditation experience. We listen to them, and at the same time, we're listening to ourselves. It's a skill we're developing, a type of listening, receptive listening, rather than active or passive listening. It's more the language of connection, of catching what you were saying, taking it in and then responding. This may feel foreign, and it takes more effort than we're used to when we speak. I'm a New York Jew, and I tend to blurt things out. That's the culture I grew up in. I have needed to learn to restrain my words because they can be misunderstood or hurtful. This gets into the relational and psychological aspects of our practice. Being listened to and understood is a human need. I put myself in the category of someone who needs this more than others because I didn't get enough of it in childhood. So, are we making up for it in adulthood? I don't know, but of course I'm going to hang out with you in this question. There's a sense of wanting to join you in the search rather than find answers for you. So I'm going to read another set. Well, actually, any comments about what I just read? And then I'll read another one. How did it spread through? Honestly.
I wish I was in that conversation. That sounded pretty good.
Well, that's what we're doing now.
Yeah.
We're in a conversation.
And for those of you on Zoom, if you'd like to comment or share, you can unmute yourself, or if someone's speaking, you can raise your hand to let the speaker know you're up next.
Well, then would you like me to go on?
James.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I really I like what you read. I noticed at the beginning you're talking about like stories will evolve and talking about the inner narrator. But I was just got me to kind of thinking there that the inner narrator sometimes it's negative and always come up. But I was thinking that that would mean the inner narrator can evolve, and that and that would be a really good thing.
well, yes, exactly. Yes, the internet, I'm so glad you said that. That's what happens with this practice over time. The inner narrator evolves, and the inner narrator, for most people, this practice is not right for everybody. No practices, but the inner narrator becomes more friendly. And that friendliness is metta. That is, we get more friendly. That's a better definition, by the way, of metta than loving kindness. Loving kindness Buddhism was brought over here to the West by Protestant missionaries, and loving kindness is a very Protestant kind of word, but a better translation is friendliness. And it's so more down to earth. It's like, it's so more experiential. Like, oh, it's getting friendlier. My inner narrator is friendlier. If when times are rough, it's caring, it's compassionate, it's not giving me a hard time because whatever, I didn't do what I wanted to do or thought would have been better to do. Whatever. Yeah. So that's you really got right to it. The inner narrator is what evolves.
I see Roz has her hand
But
raised.
the catch about that is You saying something?
When you finish, there's another person on Zoom that'd
Okay.
like to share.
But the catch about that, the risk I have to tell you is that if you really let your stories in and you have a harsh, or sometimes harsh, we all have sometimes harsh inner narrators, if I dare say, you have to be with that and know the harshness more directly, know the dukkha of it. And as you get to know the dukkha of it, it starts to wear away some. And that can happen in many ways. Someone online?
Yes. Okay, Roz.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how this works because I got a flash that said unmute your microphone if you want to speak. So, hello everyone, in person and on Zoom. I love that topic of stories, and it's something that I've been turning over in my own mind because I'm signed up without realizing it to give a Dharma talk to one of my other Sanghas the weekend after the elections. And when I signed up, I didn't realize that was going to be the timing of it. So I've been trying to prepare with a topic that no matter what happens would be a good topic to bring up. And so I was thinking about stories, and I'm learning so much from my other spiritual friends about a different way to look at the stories that keep repeating themselves. And, and I love what James said about the inner narrator evolving. And for me also, there's often like a meta narrator, like a bird's eye view narrator that's happening at the same time, or soon after the inner narrator. And so I'm just learning to ask myself, why or what's happening? What can I learn from the fact that this story keeps coming up again and again, and how it might be changing, and what lies beneath? What else is there in the story that that I might want to be paying attention to? So.
Yeah, and there's a few good directions there, many. But one would be, I think underneath those stories that often keep repeating is a need that you have. And so to really know something about what might be driving that. What is your need? And I'll make a plug. We're going to do a retreat the weekend after the election. It's called the Retreat After the Election and online. But not many people are signing up. We thought people would want to sit and meditate, but I guess people don't so much because it's kind of, but anyway, there's still room, is the point. I don't know. I think it's a good thing to do that following weekend, whatever happens, to just sit with caring people in meditation. So, I don't know what my Dharma talks are going to be, though. I haven't gotten there. I'll respond to what's happening. All right. Anything else before I read a bit more? Okay. So the next section is also a conversation. I think I won't go back and forth. It's a little, whatever, not strenuous. That's the wrong word. It was fun, but I think I'll stay with it.
You can change the pitch of your voice.
What's that?
Change the pitch of your voice.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I could try that. Okay, that'd be good.
Just
For
an
my
idea.
kind of non-acting career. Okay, so, culture seems appropriate to read about culture in this group. So this is culture, and again, it's a conversation. We're talking about culture in chapter 2 because it matters so much and in so many ways. We need culture, but it can also box us in. I grew up starved for culture. The first time my father invited home a Japanese business associate who brought us housewarming gifts of lacquered bamboo dishes, I wanted to move to Japan. Interesting, because I grew up embedded in Jewish culture so much that I didn't have any close friends who were not Jewish. The culture I grew up in seemed like a misfit in many ways. I yearned for something different. So you went searching too? I know I did. The urge was so strong that I had to leave home and get into a bit of trouble. I could not find myself in American culture. So I ended up in Chinese culture, Persian culture, Italian culture, Nepali culture. Ironically, in order to find myself, I had to leave the culture I was born into. Yes, did I ever go searching? I tuned in, turned on, dropped out, like a quintessential hippie. And after that, a radical lesbian, deeply embedded in the Back to the Land movement. We were on a mission to change the world. We did change things, sometimes for good, but some changes were more harmful. My desire for a cohesive community with a transformative mission remained. Now I have found it in our reflective meditation Sangha. What do we really mean by culture here? I'm referring to something that goes deeper than the accoutrements, like the garb we wear or the ornaments in the meditation hall. That's the most obvious cultural signaling, isn't it? I'm more interested in what's underneath that. Maybe the values that drive these signals and representations. Okay, looking at the values underneath unveils something about the way we are together. I won't go to the front of the room when I teach or sit elevated on a throne or stage. We have the chairs put in a circle or little boxes on Zoom, all the same size. That's signaling about power and not elevating ourselves as teachers, but maybe not enough. There are more subtle underlying dynamics, especially regarding power. And those dynamics are hard to talk about, but in our culture, we talk, we use language for what's going on in our meditations and between us. That's something we value. So we have agreements in place to remind us to stay with that focus. Yes, and we talk in specific ways, not the usual ways of talking. We use the language of experience. We don't talk about others' experiences except in very specific ways. Our culture is about honesty and authenticity, not about posturing and not about small talk. Can I say something about cults here? When everyone is doing the same thing, using the same lingo, thinking they all mean the same thing? It's very cohesive and connected. Too much so. Yes, and culture and cult share the same Latin root. Excuse me, falling. It's a slippery slope. A group can easily slide from a culture to something that boxes us in, traps us into something cult-like. Culture inherently has insiders, outsiders, and bystanders. We're the insiders in reflective meditation culture. We hope our culture is open enough for someone to come and try it on, see if it fits. You don't have to jump in with both feet. What about culture as it's commonly spoken of in terms of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, etc.? Our Sangha is somewhat heterogeneous. We're mostly white, middle-aged, older women, a combination of heterosexual and lesbian, with a sprinkling of men and people of color. Yes, we'd like to become more diverse, though heterogeneous cultures like ours are more inviting to folks who are similar. We want to welcome you, the reader, to be inside with us, however you might identify and associate, but we know that can't happen in chapter 1. You need more time to see if we're a fit. Also, what does it mean to be an insider from reading a book anyway? Though I know what it's like to read a book and feel I'm either with it or alienated or back and forth. Some people may say these distinctions are artificial, but we all know what it's like to feel on the outside when you want to belong. Ah, here I already said this. Yes, when I was first practicing Buddhism, I felt excluded from most sanghas. Not intentionally, but rather I felt so alienated and invisible. My experience as a lesbian were simply not on the radar. Things have changed a little since then, haven't they? Probably we can all tell painful stories about being outsiders, maybe especially in our teenage or young adult years. Maybe that happens anytime we feel rejection. One more thing about culture and its roots. Cultivation comes in here, and that's really what we're trying to do. Cultivate a practice, cultivate curiosity and kindness, cultivate a reliable path through this twisty, turning life. So I'll end reading there. And again, Anybody want to say anything? Then perhaps it's time to meditate. So let me give you a few introductions to what we do, and then then you can take it as you wish or as best for you. So we meditate silently, and I'm not going to change that. I won't guide your meditation. And if you have, I don't know how much experience each of you have with meditation, but if you have experience, well, most people have some experience with meditation by this point in time in Portland, Oregon. So, you're free to do whatever meditation practice you do. And in other words, you're free to sort of guide yourself. And also you could just try, because in reflective meditation, we're a little more, well, we call it, sometimes, I think I might have read this last week, free range compared to the chickens, that we really let things be a little freer. We don't, try to keep it into one particular, and just sort of see how receptive is another word, just allowing what arises to arise. Or you could do a little of both, and by the way, you will do a little of both. If you have an established practice, you'll go back to that because it's in yet. So then we'll do that and you meditate for 30 minutes, right? That's
However long you wish.
What's that?
However long you wish, yeah.
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 So we'll meditate for 30 minutes, and then here's where it becomes a little different. There's clipboards and pens and paper there, and you'll get a chance to actually try to write what happened in your meditation in the language of experience. This is tricky. Remember I said it's a long time to learn this language. So, but just try to not, if you say something like, I was feeling compassionate, try to take it a little further. Like, I could feel this kind of warmth in my body, and I was thinking about whatever, my spouse and their challenges, and I was just feeling I got it. I was feeling good to get it and care, whatever. But just try to go farther into the experience, and you won't remember most of it. Okay, so don't stress if you can about that. You just remember a little bit. It's all we ever remember, by the way. So especially if you go into some altered states of meditation, memory can function differently. It can function more clearly, more astute, or the opposite, or everything in between. By the opposite, I mean, we really can't pull back stuff. And you're not, of course, probably trained to do that, to try to find your own words for what happens to you in your meditation. Usually for people, it's easiest to just write what comes first. Like, oh, I remember that. It's in the middle of the meditation, no problem. Oh, and then I remember that. Oh, but by the way, I remember it earlier on this happened. So just what's easiest. So I'll give you about 10 minutes to do that. And then hopefully I'll have some conversations with some of you. Not hopefully, I will. I'll have some conversations with some of you about what happened in your meditation, but I will explain that process when we get there. Any questions about the process we're going to do? So do you have the lights turned off for the meditation and making the door shut?